Hey, the top two teams stumbled again, and a number of other finals contenders didn't help their case to play in September. But some teams from outside the eight are storming home. It sort of makes for a really interesting last month of footy. And it's a bit hard to get a gauge on which are the true contenders, Christian, independent of ladder position, and whether it's form that matters more or your ladder position come the end of the season, even if you are spluttering. I guess the bye after the season as well kind of adds an extra interesting dynamic whereby, you can kind of collect yourselves a little bit and all that sort of stuff. But I guess we want to look at the teams that are currently in form with a month left. And there are a number of them that are not currently the top teams. We talk about Sydney having lost, what is it now, 4 of their past 5?
Yeah, so I'll be looking at a 6-week period with our stuff. It's 2 or 4.
2 or 4.
2 of their past.
Sorry, or 2 and 4. Sorry, they've won 2 and lost 4.
6, yeah.
Whereas you've got teams like the Hawks and the Bulldogs sort of coming from not nowhere, but sort of the lower reaches of those contenders, and they're now well and truly in it. I guess if you were to look at the last 6 weeks, which is kind of like a nice little, period. It's not too short, not too long. Which team is the most informed team in the comp?
Yeah, I don't think it's any surprise that it's Brisbane. So looking at this at the last 6 weeks of AFL football, so some teams had a bye 6 weeks ago, so they've only got 5 games in this period. But yeah, I've done a form ladder, based on win-loss across the last 6 weeks. Brisbane 6 and zip, the only team that hasn't lost a game across the past 6 weeks. Sort of sitting there with a percentage of 129 across those rounds, which is it's on top of the ladder, but the third best percentage of any team. And with the Hawks sort of sitting third with 4 wins and 1 loss. So Freo's in second with 5 wins, 1 loss. So Hawthorn sort of gets screwed a little bit by the 1 fewer game, but they actually have the best percentage of the last 6 weeks, Hawthorn, at 145%. So you can see how strongly they're finishing the season. Bulldogs in 4th are also 4 and 1 with a percentage of 120%. And St Kilda's one that sticks out to me. They're only 8th on the form ladder in that time. 3 wins, 2 losses in their 5 games, but a percentage of 129.9 in that. So
which is interesting considering, I guess, 6 or 7 weeks ago is when they were really sort of blasted for that boring, dour game style.
Yeah.
And then they came out the next week, lost narrowly to the Lions as part of, I think, this run. But have really shown an attacking step that we just hadn't seen for
especially the last 2 or 3 weeks.
The
yeah, the defence is still as measly as it always been, but yeah, they're starting to increase their scoring. And we've seen a lot of teams that sort of, you can get a lot out of the last 8 to 9 weeks of a season. So usually we look at when every team's finished having a bye, so once all the bye rounds are done, there is a sort of good previous history of looking at the bottom 10 teams in that time and who sort of has the best run home. They might not necessarily make finals. It does hold you in good stead for the next year. So these numbers here of the way St Kilda's finishing this season sort of, wouldn't be surprised to see them be the team that jumps up into the finals next year. Whereas a lot of the other teams, again, Hawthorn, we sort of expect them to almost make finals this year. They're having a great, they're in that bottom 10, they're having a great finish to the end of the season. So if they don't make finals and still finish as strongly as they are, it still holds them for good. I wouldn't say it's a failure and they've got to regroup and go again. We've seen in previous years, finishing 1 year strong, especially from the bottom 10, will propel you into the top 8 more often than not the next year.
But there are some teams that were flying on top of the ladder. In fact, the top 2 teams up until a couple of weeks ago, or last week rather, when Carlton lost, they are one of the teams that have had a real struggle over the past 6 weeks, and the Swans, who are still, I guess by fortune of their form earlier in the season, still top of the ladder.
Yeah, so both outside the top 8 across the last 6 weeks on the form ladder. So Carlton sitting 9th with 3 wins, 3 losses, a decent percentage of 119.5. The Swans, as we just spoke about at the start of it, 2 wins, 4 losses, percentage of 112, are sitting 12th on the AFL form ladder in that time, behind teams like Melbourne and Adelaide. So we know Melbourne's probably dropped off slightly, and Adelaide's sort of improving from the bottom of the ladder a little bit. Have both overtaken Sydney. Gold Coast sitting 13th, but Essendon's another one that we sort of spoke about as well, sitting 14th, 2 wins, 4 losses. And the percentage, so I spoke about Carlton, still got a percentage of 119. Sydney still got a percentage of 112 in those 6 weeks. Essendon 2 wins, 4 losses with a percentage of 87.16, a fair way behind their opposition.
How easy is Sydney now to work out? Have they been found out, or is it more they've got injuries now at the wrong time of the year as well? Is it a bit of both, or what's the main thing that's gone wrong?
I think they have been found out a little bit in terms of get them on turnover. They've lost the same way each time. It's been blasted from turnovers. The Bulldogs' victory is very different to the other 3 or 4 that they had in terms of just the margin and the ability to sort of get ahead in so many of the stats. But another high mark game, Sydney's turnover game, I think has been worked out. They're not scoring as well from turnover. They're a bit easy to score from turnover. So I think teams have figured them out. But in saying that, you still got to look at 3 of their 4 losses being within a goal. So it's not much that they have to fix to get back.
Yeah, I'm not concerned by them at all, to be honest. They're
Really?
still 6 points on top of the ladder.
Well, as we
They
said,
can afford to have a drop-off somewhere.
Still a month of footy to go, and you talk about sort of form swings, and things can change a lot in a month of footy. In fact, at Champion Data, the month heading into finals is kind of known as the runway. I think we heard that for the first time last year. Can you, I guess, explain and give a refresher to the listeners of what that means in the context for the flag hunt?
Yep. So we've spoken about the premiership standards and how we sort of had 32 key metrics, and we worked out which of the past 10 premiers have ranked top 6 in. We've spoken about that earlier in the pod, and Collingwood sort of were an outlier to that and sort of almost, broke the premiership standards for 1 year. We looked at the runway heading into last year, and again, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but the last 4 games, if you look at the last 10 premiers, they would have played 40 games in those last 10 rounds. They were about a 35-5 record or so off the top of my head, about 35 wins and 5 losses in those. So we'd seen the previous, 9 premiers before Collingwood, or previous 10 premiers before Collingwood, really have a strong end to the season, and we sort of knew that, okay, the premiers usually have a great runway. The last month you can almost pick the premiers. Last year, Collingwood sort of bucked the trend and won 1 of their final 4 games and still won the premiership. But we were internally within the office, we had huge question marks on Collingwood based on their runway last year not being great, and that first final against Melbourne where they conceded 60 inside 50s and Melbourne just couldn't kick a goal to save themselves. So Collingwood were able to sort of buck the trend and show that you can win a premiership if you're good enough. But history suggests that, you need to have your game in good order in the final month of the season to really set yourself up for a strong
So I guess
finals.
there's still signs there for Sydney and for Carlton in particular that they can turn things around, and so long as you can get some wins in the last month.
Well, it starts now, yeah.
It starts now.
The thing is, like, setting up your season, that's why it's so important as well. As much as you need form at the right time of the year, yes. Yeah, the last 3 premiers, you spoke about Collingwood, but Geelong in 2022, they lost 3 of 5 games earlier in the year in 2022. In 2021, the D's won 4 out of 9 in a middle stretch of their year as well. So there's always a form slump
it's a long season
somewhere, but I think you need to set up your year, right? Like, yes, you can have good form, but if you're playing in an elimination final, it's much better to bank the 4 points like Sydney have already done. They're going to finish top 4. They're probably going to get a home final at the SCG qualifying final. Like, they have already done enough. So what's more important? Is it starting well, setting up your season for a flag tilt, or finishing well?
I think that's the pattern you've got to go. You can't, and we spoke about it so many times. You can't play perfect footy for 23 weeks. You can't.
It's hard to be.
You can't expect it. Yeah. So I think you've set it up perfectly. If you can get yourself bank enough points early in the season to have that form drop off, but going back to the runway, as long as your form drop off gets rectified before the last month of the season hits, you're fine. So I think. And we are, as an industry, very active week by week by week. And, one team loses, so they're out and they've got no chance. And the next time they win, they're favourites. I think clubs realise, keep hearing it, it's a marathon, not a sprint. But it's perfectly, I think clubs would look at their season in 8-week blocks. And I know Geelong did that very, very well in their premiership year, where they just broke it down. We're going to have Dangerfield not play for this 6 or 7 weeks. And we're going to go through training blocks. And it was just prepared for the final 2 months of the season, if you like, 1 month of home and away to get us into the best possible position in finals. And then that 1 month of finals where we just got to win every game.
There's a mental element here as well. I just feel like the top teams, when they've sewn up these top positions, they know they're not moving anywhere. Mentally, you just don't have as much to play for as other teams and other players. That's not to say players are going out there purposely trying to lose. They are trying to win when they're out on a footy field.
Yeah.
But mentally, they're just not maybe putting in 100%. Maybe it's only 90%, 95%. And the season being as close as it is, you only need to be a couple % off to lose these sort of games.
Should get a sports psychologist on the pod and have a chat about it, because I think that's a fascinating aspect of it.
There was some Collingwood players last season who said when they had sewn up top 2, it was hard they were just waiting for finals to start. And it's not to say they were trying to lose, but I do reckon there's something legitimately in that.
Really quickly, just a couple of words on each of those sort of 4 teams that we mentioned: Brisbane, Fremantle, Hawthorn and Dogs, and what they're doing so well in the last sort of 6 weeks. Yeah,
Brisbane, best ball moving team from one end to the other, second best contested possession team, second for points for. So 3 parts of the ball movement, winning the contest and putting it on the scoreboard. They're top 2 in all of them. Freo really balanced at either end, 4th for points for, 4th for points against. I think along with Sydney, they're the only team to rank in the top 5 in both of those stats. So even though Sydney's 2 wins and 4 losses, I think they're still in the top 5 for points scored and points against.
Yep.
But yeah, Freo 4th for offense, 4th for defense. Sort of the second best team at turning their chains into a score, and the 5th best team at defending. So they've got that sort of balance at both ends of the ball. Similar with the Hawks, similar to Brisbane, I think Brisbane, they're still the third or fourth easiest team to move the ball against and third last for pressure. So the defensive side of the game for Brisbane isn't as strong. Whereas you look at Hawthorn, they're third for points for, but they're also second for points against, second for inside 50 differentials, so keeping the ball at their end of the field. Second fewest points conceded from turnover.
A tough team to play at the moment.
Yeah, they've actually got both sides of the ball sort of in top three sort of categories. So they're flying along, and I sort of said Brisbane can match it with Hawthorn offensively, but once you look at the defensive side of things, Brisbane drop away a fair bit, and Hawthorn sort of does look like the form team.
Just quickly on Hawthorn, could you project that from Hawthorn these last couple of months from then? Could you see this happening somewhere?
We've been
I
talking
like to
about
say
Ramble against for a
exactly. I
while.
like to say that yes, we have been pumping up Sam Mitchell and the just spoke about 8 weeks blocks of footy and the way you plan. I think Sam Mitchell has planned to just nail certain stats at each time of the year. So last year was all about just with the ball in our hands, we want to be a safe ball movement team. But by the end of the year, they started to get a bit more defensive and work out their structures. This year is all about getting to contest, winning the ground ball. Now they're doing that so well, it's just that constant surge. They back themselves to win the ground ball. They set up a bit more aggressively. They win territory. So sort of, yes, I think I could sort of see it coming based on Sam Mitchell had done clear sort of progression every 4 or 5 weeks that he's taken since he took over at the start of last year. And the Bulldogs go the other way. So Brisbane Hawks sort of spoke about offense is getting them through at the moment. So yeah, with the Bulldogs sort of the last 6 weeks, they're dropped from second for points for down to 12th. So they were second from round 0 to 14, now 12th. But it's their defence. They're ninth. They were ninth for points against. They're now third for points against.
The Rory Lobb effect.
Yeah, so sort of sitting high in that form ladder, but only 10th for scoring per inside 50, but the second hardest team to score against. So they're doing it on the defensive side of the ball. Middle of the table offensively, which is fine. But as I said, yeah, you can look at Hawthorn nailing both sides, Brisbane nailing offence, Bulldogs nailing defence, but they've all sort of got different
Question
parts of the
without
game
notice.
going well.
As a stats guy, would you rather be a team that is faltering into finals but finish fourth, or would you rather be a team that comes with a head of steam like the Dogs or the Hawks and finish 6th or 7th?
Yeah, I'm going with the runway. I'm going with finishing with a head of steam. I don't think you want to flirt with form late in the year. As I said, we're 1 year removed from seeing the premiers just finish with a sort of.
They're looking more like an
look
out-of-a-box
lacklustre.
premier.
And exactly,
as it
they
goes.
might not be able to back it up with a finals appearance this year, Collingwood. So yeah, it's interesting. But yeah, you got to have form at the right time, and I think end of the year is the right time to have it.
Looking at these metrics, can Hawthorn win the flag if they make finals? Are they genuinely a premiership contender?
You probably have to look a bit more deeper into when they are. They haven't played Carlton yet at all this year. They haven't played Sydney in that time. So it's whether they can do that 4 weeks in a row. If you're coming from the bottom four, basically they're going to do it 4 weeks in a row against 4 good teams. So it makes it hard. I think that's the hard one to sort of predict. Can you do it for 4 weeks against 4 teams? Especially with Hawthorn, if they get to 7th or 8th, every week they're going to be playing someone that's ranked better than them, which they haven't had to do at this stage of the year. But short answer, probably yes. Yes, the way they're playing, they can beat anyone on the day.
They're playing such good footy, but I look at their key forwards like Mabior Cholin, Kalsha Dick cannot lead you to a premiership. I don't care how good you are. Surely they've been so
Yes.
good, but bloody hell, I just can't see it.